Hello everyone, welcome to another Versus Video Deck Tech. I am Brian Braun-Duin and I'm joined by
Chris Van Meter.
Christopher Van Meter himself.
Yes.
Mr. 8 and 2 over here. So we have
Every day.
just every day 8 and 2. All right, we have an excellent deck here for you. Sunny Delight, Blueberry Splash.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful of flavor. Delightful flavor, actually.
Oh, brother.
This is basically another one of my patented base white devotion decks. This time, instead of going red for Change of the Rocks and Assemble or anything like that, we're actually just going straight blue for Detention Sphere, Sphinx's Revelation, Azorius Charm, and Afara, God of the Polis. And one little known fact, Afara, God of the Polis cannot be destroyed by Polis Crusher. That man had one job.
One job.
One job and cannot do it.
Oh, man.
So anyway, the reason I have a blue-white deck here is I think that with some of the new cards actually combo very well with some of these blue cards. For example, we have Brimaz, and Brimaz puts a 1/1 into play every time he attacks or blocks, which is very effective with Afara. So the way Afara works is you get to draw a card each upkeep if you had a creature come into play the prior turn. So you know, you can attack with Brimaz, you get a token come into play, that's going to have Afara trigger the next turn on your opponent's upkeep. Now, if you block with Brimaz on their turn, you get to get another Cat Soldier, you get to trigger Afara again on your turn. So it's like drawing 2 extra cards with Afara just in one turn cycle.
Yep.
And you can also do that trick with Heliod too by making a cleric on your opponent's turn. So there's a lot of neat interactions with Afara and a lot of the token generation this deck has. Same with Precinct Captain. You can attack with the Precinct Captain, get a token, and that'll trigger your Afara. So yeah, I really like that aspect of the deck. You have a lot of like neat token interaction with that. Another thing we have is Archangel of Thune. Now I think Archangel is one of the more powerful cards in Standard right now. It's starting to actually see a lot more play than it was before.
It's picking up a lot of steam with the Saito blue-white deck that people have just been crushing lots of tournaments with this last weekend.
Exactly, yeah. So Archangel's starting to get its time in the sun, and one of the neat interactions we have is Azorius Charm. Probably the least used mode on Azorius Charm, Lifelink, actually is very effective with Archangel of Thune. So we can like play an Archangel, then cast Azorius Charm to give our guys Lifelink, hit them, and every time a creature hits, it triggers Lifelink separately. So if you have like 6 attacking creatures and you give them all Lifelink,
6 triggers.
yeah, you're going to get 6 Archangel of Thune triggers and put 6 counters on all your guys.
Which is a little counterintuitive because the lifelink all happens at once now with the way they simplified combat.
Right.
But each instance of life gain will trigger Archangel, and each creature is a different instance of life gain.
Exactly. And it's also neat to note that Precinct Captain is first strike. So if you give all your guys Lifelink and hit with a Precinct Captain, you actually get to grow your entire team before the regular combat damage step. If you have an Archangel in play as well. So that's a pretty sweet interaction. Then we also get Sphinx's Revelation, which is amazing with Nykthos. Put a bunch of white permanents in play, Revelation for 9, game's over.
Basically.
And one awesome thing you can do is like if you have a Nykthos in play, you can activate Nykthos, add like maybe 6 white mana if you have 6 white permanents, play a second Nykthos, add another 6, then cast a Revelation for like 12 or something like that to just kind of bury your opponent a little bit.
Seems pretty fair.
Another cool thing is Spear of Heliod works really well. It's always worked well with Precinct Captain, but now it really works well with Brimaz too. Your Brimaz actually attacks for 6 damage just by himself with the Spear of Heliod, which is basically like Geist of St. Traff level.
It's pretty sweet.
Plus he blocks and does other things too. And then the last thing I want to mention is Blind Obedience, which Blind Obedience is pretty sweet in providing devotion. It's just going to sit and play and provide some devotion for you. And I wasn't a fan of Blind Obedience in the red version of the deck because we didn't have any way to draw cards. Blind Obedience is only really good if you can just trigger it a bunch of times, playing a bunch of cards. But now that we have Revelation, we can do things like Revelation for a bunch.
And Afara.
And Afara, yeah. We're going to draw a bunch of cards. So like we can Revelation for 9 or 10 or something awesome like that. And then the next turn we can use Nykthos to just play a bunch of cards and extort on every single one of them, which turns on Archangel of Thune.
It does.
When you gain a life. So there's a lot of neat interactions with this deck. So I'm hoping some of these synergies are actually going to be powerful enough to make a blueberry splash in Standard, as some would say.
Who knows?
So and then the other addition to the deck is Temple of Enlightenment. So we don't have to go max Guildgate on this one.
Probably the most anticipated card out of Born of the Gods so far.
Probably is, actually, yeah.
So.
The temples are real good. We were able to actually identify that at the beginning of Theros, that they were very good, and that has been proven to be true. They've been dominant. So
like even to the point of playing like off-color temples or temples that like just as a way to scry. Like we saw the burn deck before the Invitational. All the mono black decks are playing just like the blue black or the black white scry land, just because the ability to scry while still developing your mana is just really good.
Yeah, if I didn't have a double blue spell like Sphinx's Revelation, I'd probably play Temple of Silence over Azorius Guildgate, just for more scry.
Yep.
And I guess the last card in our deck is Elspeth, which I think is kind of self-explanatory at this point in time. Just real good. That's all I have to say about that. But yeah, so this is the main deck for Blueberry Splash, and I will get onto the sideboard in a second. All right, so for the sideboard, the first big improvement we get is Revoke Existence from Born of the Gods. I think this is kind of one of the... This was actually, at one point in time, my favorite card in the spoiler, which is it's a Scars of Mirrodin reprint, so not exactly the most exciting. But
yeah, I was actually hoping that it was going to be an M14, to be honest. Like, it felt like it would have been a perfect fit in M14 as we moved into the format. But I'm happy it's here now. That's definitely for sure. Yeah,
some of the gods are super annoying to deal with for a lot of decks, and reprinting Revoke Existence along with a effective Deglamour reprint finally offers us some good removal options for the gods. I don't think Thassa is going to be nearly as dominant anymore if we can actually get her off the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about this. It's also still an answer to Detention Sphere too. So this is basically Glare of Heresy that also gets Thassa and some other stuff. So I think Revoke's really good. Needle is really good against all the Planeswalkers. Good against Underworld connections. Pretty good against most decks. Almost main deckable, to be honest. But I don't want to have too many Needles because you don't want to flood out on Needle when your opponent's beating you down with a creature or something. But Needle's always a card that's very... I usually like to have one on my board. Angel Serenity is basically for Devotion matchups, such as Red and Blue Devotion and Green Devotion, because none of those decks really deal with your stuff. They're not killing your permanents.
Yeah.
So you can build up your own Devotion, and then Angel Serenity just trumps whatever they're doing. So, if both of you guys are just building up a ton of mana and they're playing Polychronoses and Arbor Colossuses, and then you're just removing everything from the battlefield, you're going to win that battle. So that's where Angel Serenity comes in. Supreme Verdict, I normally don't like it in decks like this, but we actually have a pretty low number of creatures, and one of our main creatures is Archangel, which comes down after Verdict. So I think Verdict's the fine answer to a bunch of decks where we can side out, maybe side out our Precinct Captains if they're bad in some matchups and bring in Supreme Verdict, or even keep in Precinct Captain and use Precinct Captain or Brimess to force them into overextending into a Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, I feel like Verdict plays a similar role to Angel Serenity against the Devotion-based decks. Against Mono Red or the Red Devotion, the Blue Devotion, and the Green Devotion decks, their whole goal is just to overextend to take advantage of their mechanic, and there's just an uncounterable trump for it that comes down before Angel if we need it.
Yep. 3 Negate. Historically, the worst matchup for White Devotion has always been Sphinx's Revelation decks, just by a long shot. Those are always the real bad ones. So 3 Negates really helps a lot there because the card that always beats you is Sphinx's Revelation. So having an answer to Revelation is pretty key. And Elspeth's also very good against the deck. So that's why I went for Negate over something like Dispel. But I think Negate's pretty important for combating those decks. Likewise, we have Jace Memory Adept and Aetherling as additional trumps in the matchup. I think Aetherling's better than Memory Adept against them, but at the same time, without the ability to, they're going to kill all your creatures, so it's very hard to build up Devotion with Nykthos, so I don't want to flood out on 6s, and we already have 4 Elspeths, so that's why I went 2 Memory Adepts and 1 Aetherling.
I think the Memory Adept has kind of fallen a little to the wayside, and people have kind of forgot about it a little bit, but I think it's actually very good. Aetherling is good too, but Memory Adept is, I feel like it's a little easier to get into play. You don't have to try and protect it as much, and sometimes you just get lucky on the mill 10 and hit their answers to the Jace, and there's just no way you can lose.
Yeah, and like one of the nice things about Memory Adept too is like the blue-white deck wants to tap out for Jace on 4. And if we're on the play, which we probably will be because we probably didn't win game 1, we can, you know, just call it like 5. I see it. Yeah, we can just play this on 5 right after they tap out for their Jace, and ours is better. Yep. And then 2 Last Breaths, very good against all the Devotion decks. And it's also, there's some nice synergy with our own Archangel Thune too, which sometimes comes up, where you can Last Breath an Elspeth Soldier, grow your team and kill your opponent. That actually happens from time to time. So pretty neat interaction there, and also just a very powerful Devotion hoser against a lot of Devotion decks.
Absolutely. And with the way that this deck is constructed, we're actually fairly weak to Nightvale Spectre, and this is just like the best answer in our colors for Nightvale Spectre. That also crosses over to answering cards like Master of Waves, opposing Precinct Captains, or even stemming some damage from like Soldier of the Pantheon.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And actually that brings up a good point too. Spear of Heliod's actually a very good answer to Nightvale Spectre as well. Something I failed to mention, but Nightvale Spectre doesn't do a lot of damage by itself. The damage that it does is mostly in stealing your cards and providing devotion. And Spear of Heliod is a great way because you can destroy it in the combat step with Nightveil's trigger on the stack, and it limits their devotion, and they don't get to cast any of your cards.
Yep.
So Spear is very good against Nightvale Spectre. But this is the white-blue devotion deck. I honestly think that this is probably one of the best versions yet, so I'm excited to see how it plays out.